Alrighty, welcome back to another episode of Two Plane Sports. Today is April 5th, and as you can tell, we are now trying a little bit of a different platform to record these, so hopefully this goes really well. We're going to be able to put up more banners and have more information in the video, so you're not guessing after we ramble on about a player for about 5 minutes. You won't be sitting there questioning who it is. So we're trying to improve, so we'll see how this goes. So today's episode, we're going to be talking about Oklahoma's hosting a 2024 linebacker in Braden Platt. Oklahoma also made a top 12 for a wide receiver. Kind of came out of the blue, but the more we read into it, it's kind of interesting. And then Isaiah McMorris, 2024 three-star wide receiver, seems to be going really well with Oklahoma. And then the state of Oklahoma also passed an NIL bill. So it's interesting in that bill what it means and everything else. So let's just jump right into it, and let's start with the really good news and someone that I'm extremely excited for. And I know we've talked about him a little bit, but it's been a really long time. Is 2024 linebacker Braden Platt, 6'2", 240 pounds, out of Yelm, Washington. 247 has him ranked as the 91st overall player and the number 9 linebacker in the class. The composite has him a little bit lower, but he has played well. He's projected to potentially go back to the 5-star range. I want to say that the first time we talked about him, he was a composite 5-star. If not, he was really on the edge. But he came to Oklahoma on Tuesday for an unofficial visit. He's scheduled to go visit Michigan State later this week, I think this weekend. So he's making the rounds. Brandon, I got to ask, what are your thoughts on Platt? He's an extremely talented player. What do you think?
He's also a very, very smart kid, too. He had a 4.0 GPA last season in high school. He played running back, so it goes back to us recruiting two-way athletes, which I think is cool. He's another kid out of the state of Washington. I think it's pretty cool that Oklahoma is really, borderline starting to make that an area, a bigger area of interest when you've already got Josiah Wagner, you've got Heath Ozida, and now you're really targeting Braden Platt. And Braden Platt can straight out play. I mean, as I mentioned, he's a two-way athlete. He's all over the field. He knows what he's doing on both sides. He's a very smart kid. He's a kid that Brent Venables, I think, can do a lot with, can shape him. As you mentioned, he was at one point a 5-star, maybe making his way back towards there. He's seems to be a little bit underrated on the other sides. 24/7 has him, in the top 100 nationally. Anytime you get a kid like that with that kind of talent, that he's got a huge brain too, that I think could work very well in Oklahoma's defense. Brent Venables can do a lot with that. Hopefully the visit goes really well. And then it's interesting to see another Oklahoma-Michigan State battle. Hopefully we go 2 for 2 in those and land both these kids.
Yeah, first of all, Michigan State really needs to back off. They just need to stay in their own lane. You did bring up a good point, though, with recruiting in the state of Washington. The fact that a lot of sites aren't too high on him, I think, shows that there's a huge opportunity there for Oklahoma to go in and really evaluate these kids and see what others really aren't maybe bothering to see or able to get to watch, because the state of Washington is pretty far out there. You really have to be planning to go there. It's tough to get there. I mean, for the most part, it's not like a destination, to be completely fair, but the fact that Oklahoma's seen that as an area of opportunity to take advantage of a place that might not be recruited as highly as it should be, there's something that the staff is doing that we didn't see previous staffs and very many staffs do around the country. So +1 for OU there. Braden is very talented. He kind of reminds me of a little bit of Kip Lewis, but bigger at a younger age. I don't remember exactly how big Kip Lewis was coming into Oklahoma, but just looking at their frames, Braden looks a lot more filled out already, more so than Kip Lewis was coming out of high school. So if you can get Braden on this roster, he, depending on the linebacker situation, could be a guy that is involved in a 2-deep situation simply because of depth, and then he's just that talented. He is definitely a guy that if more scouts from these platforms can get their eyes on him, should definitely boost his ranking on all the platforms and potentially be a fringe 5-star.
So the only thing I'm going to disagree is at one point in time in the show, we argued that Oklahoma to Washington was not that far of a drive, and you just said it was. So we're contradicting ourselves.
We did say that. Brandon or Jose, are you hearing a white noise? Am I going crazy? Okay, it's Jose's mic. I'm not sure what's going on. So I just wanted to make sure I wasn't going crazy. But you guys bring up some really good points. And what's really cool is last year Platt had 55 carries for 765 yards, basically averaged 14 yards a carry, and he scored 18 touchdowns. And he's being recruited as a linebacker, but yet he's averaging 14 yards a carry, 18 touchdowns. And last year he put together. Basically 22 or 41 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss. And if I remember right, he lifts a ton of weight. I think he posts videos on Twitter and he's extremely strong.
Not a power lifter or something though. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I would imagine that Venables is taking this recruitment head on, heading it up. Him and Ted Roof, obviously, but I really would imagine Venables is all over him about being a Sooner and everything else and taking this. I really am not sure where Platt's going to end up. And I do think it will be interesting to watch. I mean, he's been visiting, he's from the Pacific Northwest. He's been visiting other schools. It'll be interesting to see where he ends up going. It seems like distance is not a factor for him. So if Oklahoma can show that, you can be developed here and you can be that guy here, I think it can end up working out well for them. It'll be interesting to see if Oklahoma gets an official. Do we see him schedule an official? On his 247 profile, it looks like no officials have been scheduled, unless I'm not seeing it. So it'll be interesting to see if he schedules some officials, and hopefully Oklahoma's in there, and we'll really be able to get an idea of where Oklahoma truly sits in this recruitment.
A couple nights ago, we talked about Peyton Pierce and Sammy Brown as 5-star linebackers. And obviously, those are guys we still want, but I think Braden Platt is a good consolation prize, I guess, if you will, if you can't win out on those two guys, because we were a little skeptical on the live. But I think if you land Braden Platt, like Jose said, this kid can play. I think probably maybe not as well, but he's up there. And I think with the right coaching, he can be all of them and better.
No, that makes sense. I would agree with you on that. So looking at a top 12 that Oklahoma ended up making today, Hayes Fawcett put out an edit for Jeremiah McClellan, 2024, 4-star wide receiver from St. Louis, Missouri, put Oklahoma in his top 12. And it kind of came out of the blue because we have not talked about him and he's not been on our radar at all. And I go and click on the link, and that Hayes Fawcett put out on going to his On3 article about his top 12. And it seemed like that he listed about every school that he's already been to and the schools that he wants to go to. And it doesn't seem like Oklahoma was on that list, unless I was looking at the wrong article. I personally get the feeling that it is just to get the logo on there and get a little excitement. I think Oklahoma's in a really good spot for it with a lot of other wide receivers. Steve Wiltfong just recently put in a crystal ball in favor of Ohio State. Ohio State is on a tear. They are recruiting well right now. Jose, what do you think? I mean, McClellan's obviously talented. I just don't think he's that guy for Oklahoma.
I would agree. And I don't think it would be that big of a miss. Watching the highlights that he put out on his own Twitter page, he's very talented wide receiver, don't get me wrong. But it was all very similar routes that he was running. He was just running go routes and showing how he could beat press coverage, which is not an easy thing to do. In this offense, he's not just going to be running straight down the field every single play. He's going to need to be agile, get around tackles. And it's someone that we're going to talk about in a little bit, I think has a better skill set and isn't as highly ranked. Jeremiah McClellan, in an Ohio State offense, I think is where he would be the most dangerous, because Ryan Day, and we'll see how Brian Hartline does next season, but Ryan Day has put wide receivers in a position that they are so wide open that quarterbacks, I think, look a little bit better than they actually are, and Ohio State quarterbacks really haven't been very good in the NFL. And I think it's because the wide receivers are both so talented and are put in such a good spot that they're really the ones that should be looked at better for the NFL. I mean, you look at the talent that they've produced over the last 5-10 years, the wide receiver talent has way outproduced the quarterbacks once they get to the NFL. And in college, for the most part, they have a deadly duo or sometimes even a trio where cornerbacks really can't keep up. You can't double team anyone and hope that and just let other guys beat you. You have to be able to really play physical and cover well. And that just, I think Jeremiah McClellan is really best suited at Ohio State. And it seems like that's the way it's leaning because Ohio State is on a tear, like you mentioned. Just got a 5-star wide receiver on Tuesday. They might get this kid. Might pack in a 5-star quarterback in this class as well. Like they're on a tear, and I wouldn't blame them to go if he went over there.
Yeah, Brian Harline's the best in the game when it comes to receiving, or when it comes to coaching college receivers and recruiting college receivers. His resume speaks for itself. It's really tough to beat him out. I always talk about if kids are stamped by Alabama, then I still look at that. But I think when it comes to receivers, we need to start looking at if they're offered by Ohio State, because Brian Hartline knows what he's doing. He's a tough dude to beat out. But what if Jeremiah McClellan's just throwing a curveball and trying to fool everybody by putting Oklahoma as the only school he's not going to visit or hasn't talked about, and he's just going to commit and throw everybody off? That would be cool, but I don't see it. But that would be the only thing I think kids can do nowadays. That would be, a surprise or whatever. I forget who it was, but
Peyton Kirkland.
Yes, you knew exactly where I was going. Yes, because he thought he was going to pull a fast one, and he was, everybody thought he was crystal ball to Oklahoma, or he was for the longest time, and we had no reason to believe he wasn't going to be a Sooner. And then, the on-3 guy had it. So I feel like the only way you could actually throw people off the scent or, surprise them is by doing this, and then, actually committing to that school that has no chance. Someone's going to do it eventually. I don't think it's going to be Jeremiah McClellan, but what if?
So you're telling me there's a chance?
We made the top 12, baby. That's huge.
The biggest plus for OU here is that he is in St. Louis, and it seems like Oklahoma is really trying to do what they can to build a wall around that area and get in there as much as possible to create that pipeline down to Norman. We'll see if that's possible, but Brandon could be right. Could be a Peyton Kirkland situation where it's just quiet until like a week before the commitment, and it all points to not Ohio State.
Yeah, Brandon's going to look like a genius when this happens. He'll look like a genius.
First of all, I'm not picking that at all. But if it happens, I'm going to act like I picked it. We'll clip it the right way where it looks like I called it.
Yeah. So let's move on. But before we do that, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn the notification bell, and follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Apple, Spotify, and TikTok. Everything's linked in the description below. And if you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify, be sure to leave us a review. It helps us out a lot on those platforms as well. So let's move on. We're going to also talk about a 2024 3-star wide receiver, Isaiah McMorris, out of Bellevue, Nebraska, which should sound a little bit familiar considering Kate Helms is from the same area. Isaiah McMorris, extremely talented player, put up 90 catches last year. He took a visit to Oklahoma recently. He's gotten crystal balled to Oklahoma with an 8 confidence by Parker Thune. So obviously some good stuff must have happened on a recent visit. The question will be, I think Oklahoma's wide receiver recruiting they're about to get a handful of commitments here in the next month or so, give or take, 4 to 6 weeks. I think after the spring game, you're going to see, and maybe even leading up to the spring game, you're going to see 1 or 2 hop on board. I know McMorris has got some visits to other schools coming up, but I do wonder if McMorris doesn't pull the trigger and jump in early, does his spot get taken? Because DeMarco Murray is running a situation where, it's first come, first serve, and it seems like he's going to have no problem filling this. The way Oklahoma is sitting for a lot of these wide receivers, and I'm not talking about McClellan, but, others like Zion Kearney and, even Isaiah McMorris and a few others. Wesco, yeah, I couldn't think of his name, Bryant Wesco. And there's even more. Oklahoma's in a pretty good spot for a lot of players. There's only a handful of spots. I think they're only going to take like 3 wide receivers in this class. So if McMorris waits a little while, does the spot get taken, or does he jump on board here soon? I wouldn't be surprised if McMorris is one of those guys that if Hawkins does commit, I wouldn't be surprised if McMorris follows suit. Brandon, what do you think?
I don't know about your whole your take right now about if he waits too long, will the spot go? I'm going to wait a little bit on that just because at the moment we still only sit with one commit in the 24 class. So let's see what happens with that. I see what you're saying, but I'm going to pump the brakes a little bit on that. I'd like to see some more commitments start to roll in before we roll into that talk. But I think, you're onto something. Isaiah McMorris is another very, very talented athletic kid. He's the kid who's I haven't seen tape of him playing two ways in high school football yet, but he also ran track and played basketball. So there's a theme here that's with every kid. It seems we're going away from, okay, you're a high school receiver and you only play high school receiver. No, you're playing both sides of the ball, or you're playing basketball or football or wrestling or track. All of these kids are doing a little bit of everything. And I think that speaks to their athleticism and also the kind of kids that we are recruiting. It's only going to make us better. Isaiah McMorris, as a junior, had 90 receptions, 1,267 yards, whatever, but that 90 receptions was the state record in Nebraska for receptions in a single season. He was 65 yards short on, the single season receiving yards record for the state of Nebraska. He also had 15 touchdowns. He's a kid that I forget who it was this is a while ago now, months ago, probably before I left for the Army, but a kid on the smaller side. He's 6 foot, 168, I think is what 24/7 listed him as. But he's very, very fast. It reminds me of Hollywood Brown again, just because of Hollywood Brown had to be around that size when he made his way to Oklahoma after playing at junior college. He had to be around 165, 170. And that's where this kid currently sits going into a senior year. So granted, he could get bigger, but just not the biggest kid in the world. And that's a little bit different than the receivers we have been recruiting. We have been recruiting these bigger receivers. So you look at the current roster, you've got JJ Hester, who's a very large human. You've got Jaden Gibson, who's a very large human. So we're going away from that a little bit in this recruitment with a smaller guy. But despite that smaller stature, I'll say, he's not just a burner. If you watch his tapes, he's out there laying kids out. He's a worthy blocker in the run game. Just a smaller receiver, and I think it's a little bit interesting to see that just based on what the current roster looks like and who we have been recruiting at that position.
So you brought up a point I wanted to mention on Isaiah, because this is the guy I was referring to earlier when we were talking about Jeremiah. He plays a lot more physical and seemingly is more okay with just burying his helmet into someone's chest. When you watch this kid block, he puts effort into it, and he's actually trying to help on the field. And this is from what I've seen. So I'm not saying that Jeremiah doesn't, but watching what Isaiah has done on the field as of this point in his career, he's a guy that you can kind of rely on in the run game as well. And he has the speed, like you mentioned, and he's not just being put in a situation where he's trying to burn people and take the top off the defense right now. He's being given opportunities to take bubble screens and take him to the house. He gets intermediate passes. He definitely still goes for those long bombs because those are the fun ones to get on your highlight tape. But when you can show that you can break tackles, you can take some bubble screens, you can take a slant and get an extra 15, 20 yards, or even take it to the house. That's really what, as a wide receiver, fans should want out of a guy, because when you get to college, you're not burning kids like you were in high school. You're not the biggest or the fastest or the strongest for the most part. There's definitely those anomalies like an Adrian Peterson, where just whatever level he was going to play at, he's always going to be the biggest, fastest, and strongest. But for the most part, kids aren't in that situation, and he's showing that he's not just going to put in the hard work, but he can do what is asked of him. If it's the fun plays where he gets to burn people, or if it's the gritty plays where he just needs to block for his running back and make sure that the holes are there.
And this is someone that, while he's only a 3-star, there are plenty of programs that are after him and are recruiting him hard. As much as we don't want to hear it, I mean, USC is making a run at him. Penn State, obviously Nebraska wants to keep him at home. But just because he's a 3-star and, he's only ranked at 492, and, I don't want to act like every player that Oklahoma's recruiting or whatever, they're bound to go up in the ratings, because they're not. but I think he is a guy that will end up being a top 250 player. He'll be a 4-star composite. You can't put up those stats as a junior, and then assuming that he does it again and maybe even better, you can't tell me you're not better than, at least a top 250 player in the country. I just have a hard time believing that you would be ranked around 500.
Wasn't Heath Ozida and Phil Pashotti 3-stars when we were originally first started talking about them way back when?
Yeah.
Yeah, they made the jump. I agree. I think we'll see that a lot with a lot of these kids we talk about.
Yeah, and you have kids that come in that aren't rated as high and they're already producing. We talked about on the live stream on Monday that Josiah Wagner's really flashing, and it seems like he's playing well in spring ball. And granted, it's early, but you've got kids that are contributing no matter their stars. And Phil Pachotti's playing well in spring ball, and just because you're a 3 or 4 doesn't mean you're not good enough. And I think that's what the staff's really focusing on. So. Let's move on to the last topic. We'll talk a little politics, which we never talk politics in this show, but it's very related here. It's the state of Oklahoma legislature passed a bill relating to the NIL. Currently, from my understanding, to sum it up, basically this bill, currently right now, athletes have to work with agents in order to facilitate deals. This allows... if this bill is signed by the governor, Kevin Stitt, this will allow the kids and the mom and dads to be able to represent themselves and facilitate all this, because most athletes, not like a Dylan Gabriel, doesn't make enough money to really have an agent, because it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense for someone who plays golf to probably have an agent, and all these other athletes. And they have the ability now to represent themselves. And then also the requirement is all the money that's being funded to the athlete, the person that's paying this player has to be registered with the university, or at least reported to the university. So the university has an idea, and it basically covers the university from any issues or litigation or anything by the NCAA. And basically this is kind of following suit with the state of Alabama and what they're doing. Jose, do you have some thoughts on this? I mean, I think it's a good thing as far as Oklahoma football and athletics staying competitive and staying up with the times. But what do you think?
So there's definitely a lot of positives. The biggest one, I think, is allowing the kids and the parents to be the ones that represent themselves when it comes to this stuff. Because you mentioned it, like, for the most part, especially out of high school, these kids aren't going to get that much money. You have your special cases, but they're not getting a ton of money. They're not getting a ton of people trying to come in and pay them for their name, image, and likeness. So it does become a bigger expense just to have an agent there to assist them. Another thing that I think is really positive is that I believe the law also forces the kids to take a contract class and a financial literacy class, which is important, because financial literacy, regardless of them getting NIL money, probably the biggest thing that most students aren't getting in college or high school, because it can be a complicated thing once you become an adult. And then contracts, obviously they need to know what the hell they're signing. So it's good that they're at least getting some basic knowledge, hopefully in this class that they're going to be forced to take, assuming this bill passes. The only drawbacks I see, if it is those special cases for kids that are going to get a ton of money coming out of high school or a ton of money once they are in college, hopefully they don't see this as an opportunity to not have an agent, because you do want to have someone that knows what they're doing when you are dealing with hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars in money. And because I know it's kind of different, but look at the Lamar Jackson situation, right? It's him and his mom that represent him. And that seems to be an ongoing thing that just might not ever end. An agent might be able to help that kind of thing, where in college you have someone that can better understand the lingo that companies could be using to pitch you, could be getting you a little bit more money from companies or collectives. So there's definitely drawbacks, but I think for the most part this will help students and parents and every student athlete get the money that they should be getting according to NIL.
Then you have Larry Tunsil, who also represents himself.
He has
the
Saint
greatest.
Omni.
Who?
Saint Omni.
I thought he represented himself. I thought
He does, but he has a lawyer that helps him out. So, like, at the end of the day, they just should have someone, in my opinion. But you're right. There are players that do represent themselves.
No, I was going to more or less agree with you, but there's exceptions to every rule. Larry Tunsil was just one exception I was going to use. I didn't know anything about the Saint Omni. I was not prepared to get got like that. Although I feel like he still represents himself because I'm going to rock with that. I don't know enough about this Oklahoma NIL update, truthfully, to honestly talk about it. I think it's great that players can represent themselves because you're not all Dylan Gabriels, like Brum said. You're not all Jackson Arnolds. Sometimes these kids can't do that. So I think that'll help. At the end of the day, if it helps Oklahoma in the world of recruiting and keeping up with the big dogs, which I think we're going to be fine in that department anyway, but any kind of help we get, I'm good with it. Well, let's more gooder.
Getting the school more involved might actually help prevent those bad situations from coming up. Make those very rare things because now the school can regulate what's happening a little bit more and not get in trouble.
I would hope that the school could have like lawyers on staff just review the contracts that these players are about to sign.
Rumbaugh was almost a sports agent.
No. Yeah, for sure. So that's all I've got. I don't know if you guys have any final thoughts. Brandon, do you have an individual challenge?
Yeah, boys. And this one, I thought about it today. This is going to be a fun one. I'm excited to see your guys' answers, and I think we should have like a little friendly wager on it and potentially a small giveaway for the fan who's closest or if someone hits it. So obviously it's Masters Week. We're very much excited it's Masters Week. At least I know me and Hose are. I'm pretty sure, Brum, you're a Masters guy too. So the next video we drop is what, Friday? Friday morning? Okay. So what we're going to do is this. If somebody can correctly pick the leader at the end of Friday. So pick your leader at the end of Friday. And then we need to do a wager between us three. So like whatever it might be, next time we all get together, we buy dinner and it's something easy. It doesn't have to be crazy. For the fan, I don't know, we can do for the viewer, if they get it right, we can collectively discuss that and, tweet about it, but do some sort of something fun. If and only if you have the correct leader at the end of Friday. You don't have to get the winner, but the leader on Friday. Who do we have?
I don't know who it's going to be. Rory McIlroy.
I'm going to go John Rahm.
I mean, those are the two players that are playing the best right now.
We went first.
That's ridiculous. I guess I'll say Spieth just because it's someone different.
Way to pick.
He's also playing very well, but
yeah, he is. But
luckily
Rahm
it's the end of Friday.
And McIlroy are playing really well.
Yeah, the end of Friday, I feel like is Rory's day, and then he'll choke it away on the weekend. That's his MO.
All right, so you got Rory, Brum with the Longhorn. Of course,
yeah. Of course, I did.
That guy hates Oklahoma. He hates.
Yes. Yeah, of course I do. So, made it this far. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn the notification bell on. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Apple, Spotify, and TikTok. Everything's linked in the description below, and we'll catch you guys on Friday.